Okay, today I thought maybe we'd talk about sci-fi, robot, space toys, however you like to call it, that used a flywheel as their motor. So basically you would crank the flywheel up to speed and then the flywheel keeps the toy going for X amount of time instead of a spring or instead of batteries. There's a big pile of them here in front of you, so I guess I probably should shuffle some of these things to the side so we can talk about them. Let's just move them back enough where there's enough room to play. So most of you would probably be most familiar with like the friction cars that you push and then they click or have a siren, and this is a space patrol car that used the flywheel once you got it up, you know, to keep the toy going. Most of the cars are very disappointing on how far they go. The flywheels are poor, and especially if they have a clicker in there, which robs all that flywheel energy. But the flywheel was also used in things like boats. You can see this boat actually has a propeller. It's the robot boat, and you turn this crank here to get the flywheel up to speed. You can adjust the rudder then to decide which way it's going to go when it's out in the water. And then of course there was the Space Trooper, which had a concentric wheels on the bottom, but you had a crank to get them up to speed, and then it moves along with spinning thingamabobs in the head to go along with it. And you stop before I move on. And then you have the hook robot, which again is much like the friction cars, has a moving head, and once you get the wheels going, and then the head moves back and forth, and he's still going to sit there. And of course the laser robot 008. What's interesting about this one, see, you've gotten rid of the wheels. It's not just a car with a robot body. And now you actually have a walking robot, and you have a crank that you push and turn to get him going. And then he walks along. And if you crank him up all the way, it actually has a fairly long run time. It's already gone longer than the car, the boat. Still going, and I didn't even wind him up about half speed. Could have really got crazy with him. So 008, the laser robot, has a pretty good run time. And of course there was the Craigston talking robot. Now the talking robot actually uses a D-cell battery to run the record player for when he's talking, but when he's not talking there was no motor to make a move. Instead it had your friction drive, your drive to make a move, and it's about as disappointing as most of the cars. How far it's going to go is very small. They didn't put nearly a big enough flywheel in there to capture all that energy. Back in the 1980s, Playtime came out with this little robot that has moving feet, but again it's sort of like the cars, but it has a decent flywheel in there, because if you get him up to speed, he has a real decent run time. It can cover a lot of distance, especially when you compare it to the friction cars and things like that. Came in 2 color variations that I'm aware of, the black details or the red details. Still going. And then of course when 3D printing became a thing, there was this 3D printed robot that you can, well, they didn't call it a robot, it was just a walking machine. And it's using the flywheel for 2 purposes. The particular flywheel, of course, is 3D printed plastic, but it's loaded with pennies for weight. And that gives you your flywheel. But they're also using it as a gyro. So when you get the disc spinning in there, the legs lift one at a time, and the gyro keeps it so it can stand on one leg without falling over, and it walks. And I'll put a link down below of this actual unit walking, so that I don't have to try to wind the string up and do all that on camera right now. It takes time. It's pretty cool though, especially if you get the get the flywheel going with like a compressed air gun. You can really get that sucker spinning good and he walks. But there are all kinds of other space toys that use the flywheel principle. For example, these little guys here are the ones that you push, and there's a large disc in their stomach area that's covered in sandpaper, and then there's a flint, so they throw sparks as they go. Then these ones here are more like a roulette type game. So you have the colors, or you have numbers, and you have a little BB ball that moves around as you spin them. Then here's another variation of the sparking ones, these two here. Down here we've got these flywheel driven robots. You push them, their heads move, and the text in their chest changes. It's called mini flash changes. And these ones here, you can actually see in their stomach the flywheel. And the flywheel again has sandpaper on it so they can throw sparks. And these ones you can't see the flywheel, but it's there. They all throw sparks as you push them. And let's move on down here, because I think there were a few more. You get more to the ones that just kind of have the small flywheel that throws sparks out the mouth or out the chest. Nowhere near as sophisticated as the units that I'd already showed you over here. But I just wanted to touch on a few of the space toys that had used flywheels as gyros and flywheels as a power source, sometimes sold as friction toys mostly, sometimes inertia toys. I don't think I remember ever seeing them called a flywheel toy, even though that's what they are. They're capturing the energy that you put in by either pushing the wheels or turning a crank or pulling a string, or in some cases, and I should have pointed one of those out because I have them, the long plastic zip cord that have gear teeth on them, a linear gear that you load in the item and you pull, like when you used to launch those little flying saucer toys up in the air. That's a flywheel type toy. It's capturing the energy in the flywheel. In that case, they're shaping the flywheel like a fan blade. And like I say, there's some of those in here somewhere too. In fact, here's some I'd totally forgotten about. I'm just sitting here staring at them. Here's the ripcord. You pull on that. There's a flywheel. Different colors of these guys here. This is way up above my head, so I'm hoping some of this is in frame. But there's some flywheel robots right there with a zip cord pull. So it's used a lot. It's fairly common, but it's not really talked about all that much. And kind of kicking around in my mind, maybe designing a 3D printed flywheel robot also. So we'll see what comes of that.